Two. Oh, we are live. We are live back at it again. Oh man. We are trying to get on. I hope the Supreme Court hasn't messed up our stream as well. Because the Supreme Court ruling, we are live for an emergency pod here. Mr. Cameron Calvin of Hip Politics teaming up with my girl Kayla over there at the Executive T. What's up, Kayla? How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing as good as I can with all of the stuff happening.
I know it's a little depressing, like when depending on what, like, actually no matter what party you're in, whether you follow politics or not, like what happened today in the Supreme Court partial immunity ruling. I said they issued the ruling that they just issued today. We've all been kind of sitting on pins and needles. I think it's almost one of those things that if you weren't paying attention or you're not steeped in law, you're not really sure exactly what this means. So I know with both of our platforms,
Mhm.
are really concerned about ensuring that people, that everybody is really informed about how important this is and how this affects them on their daily lives, how this affects America, how it affects our democracy, our legal system, so many things. So with that said, did you want to just kind of go over some of the basics of the case, or the basics of what just happened today? The Supreme Court deals blow to Trump's prosecution, ruling he has broad immunity. That's the headlines. That is the headlines.
Yeah,
Talk to me.
yeah, I feel like we are in a lot of yeah, I feel like we are in a lot of uncharted territory. Speaking of Trump in general, just the idea that someone that was president is facing so many criminal charges, has already been found guilty of some. We've been in super uncharted territory there, and what's happening now is he declared that he should have presidential immunity, meaning that he's shielded from any type of consequence because he was president of the United States. And like you said, we have been waiting on this ruling from the Supreme Court. And we finally got it today, and they ruled that a president can be immune from any official acts as president. And unofficial acts are not covered under that. But the question is, what is an official act? And the
So
lower
whatever the
courts will
what
be
shit,
able
it
to
seems like
decide that.
whatever.
But I
I was gonna say it seems like whatever they decide, or a president decides, it's gonna be like, officially it was a 6-3, authored by Chief Justice Roberts, who now a lot of, I think, we've been lulled into sleep to thinking like, oh, maybe he's a little bit on the Democratic or the progressive side. No, he was appointee. He's the Chief Justice. He was appointee of George W. Bush. So the ruling came
Mhm.
down along kind of, I hate to say party lines because the Supreme Court is supposed to not be partisan, but the all the justices that were appointed by Republican presidents ruled in favor, and the three dissentings were either appointed by Biden or President Obama. The Supreme Court on Monday ruled that Donald Trump cannot be prosecuted for actions that were within his constitutional powers as president. For the first time, any form of immunity from prosecution, essentially saying this is what Justice Roberts wrote. We conclude that under our constitutional structure of separated power, the nature of presidential power requires that a former president have some immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts during his tenure in office. Immunity for former presidents is absolute with respect to their core constitutional powers, Robert wrote, and a former president has at least presumptive immunity for acts within the outer perimeter of his official responsibility. The outer perimeter, what does that mean? Many prosecutors face a high legal bar to overcome that presumption. Um, and then Joe Biden just went on and he said basically this is a super dangerous precedent that they're setting, not just for potentially, I mean, we're all thinking about this in Trump terms, but this could for presidents moving forward. And this showcases, I mean, before we get into why voting matters and all of that, what are your thoughts on this? Like, what are your thoughts? Like, what are, I think everybody maybe already, to me, I think a lot of people think presidents already would never go to jail, but I don't think any president, maybe outside of Nixon, has really
Hmm.
pushed the bar to do something illegal or cause some illegal actions that we know about while in office.
I think in the normal world, like this ruling would feel crazy, but knowing who Donald Trump is and some of the things he has attempted to do already, like send hundreds of people to the Capitol to overturn the election results because he didn't win. I feel like that is what makes me super frightened because we already know this is someone who will push the limits, and he already has largely not seen consequences for most of the things that he's done. Um, so, kind of having it a loophole for him to take that even further, I think is terrifying. And like I said, in a normal world, I don't think this would be something that's so scary, but just knowing who Donald Trump is, knowing already how he avoids accountability and consequence for pretty much everything that he does, the thought of him having another term with this being possible, I think is terrifying. And I've been talking to a lot of my friends about this because I know a lot of people have been apprehensive this election year, not really knowing how they feel about it. But if you have no other reason to drive you to the polls, I think this ruling should drive you to the polls. I think the thought of Donald Trump appointing any other people to the Supreme Court should drive you to the polls. I know we were just talking about like the justices who did do this vote. And to think that in Trump's 4 years, he appointed three Supreme Court justices already that have been making these decisions that are really going to set us back for a long time. I don't know. I think it is just terrifying. I don't know what else to say about it, but I think this kind of just reignited my fire for this election. Because I will say, not that I was apprehensive, but I have just been kind of more casually engaging than I normally was when I was working in Spain in 2020. And I think this really did kind of like wake me up a little bit more because it's wild.
You run a popular news site on social media, on digital media, the Executive T. I know you posted, and I saw a lot of engagement. Have you been going through some of the comments, DMs? Like, what are your listeners and followers, and what are folks saying in the digital streets? I say after this has come out.
I'm always looking through the comments, and I think it's just always helpful to see what people are saying. And I think everyone just thinks that it's crazy. This and the Chevron ruling the other day, I think that was on Friday, people have been really concerned about. And I think we're getting to the point where people are kind of seeing the Supreme Court as like an unchecked institution that is doing things that are crazy. And even like lightly hitting on the Chevron ruling the other day, doing something like that that's giving kind of more power to the courts and like steering away from our actual checks and balances. I think people are really concerned about the state of our democracy. And it's wild to live in a time where we're seeing so many things that are unprecedented. Like I think we've been hearing that word so many times in the past, I don't know, 4 years. And it's really not normal. And even though I think my followers and a lot of people have been kind of desensitized to it a little bit more, I think the Supreme Court rulings that we've been seeing are really waking people up.
Is it? Because I think I really hope it is, and I hope it doesn't just stay online. This is the type of thing that I think we need. Like, with all respect to all the different marches and movements that are going on, I think it has to get to that point and not just like one big march or one big rally. Like, this has to be a sustained effort to say that, like, your election has consequences. If you vote for one side, Donald Trump, he more than likely will be able to replace
Hmm.
two of his justices who said that they're looking to retire with much younger people. And in the next 4 years, potentially one or two of the Democratic justices, one is getting really old, may try to retire, or they might try to force retire him. And there's no guarantee that once granted such powers and precedent, anything he pushes the line on, anything people he may want to go after politically, like he's kind of immune from that. I will say this just to offer some different perspective as well. Um, I think this is a president that is scary no matter who the president is. Joe Biden, President Trump, and then in the future, no matter what side of the party, it's like we want to actually have a belief in the system that the president has to do something right, and there's some check on his power. Right now, there's supposedly checks and
Right.
balances with the Supreme Court, with the legislative branch, which is House of Representatives and Senate, and there are checks there in terms of money, spending, impeachment, articles of impeachment, things of that nature, which I even think we've been jaded to probably recently with all the Trump impeachments, multiple impeachments, and the constant threat of impeachment. But I am nervous about just presidential power in general, and how, and like I said, it says
Yeah.
within this executive sphere of power is how it was, and it's like, what does that even mean? How is that even defined? Can the president just on a whim say, you know what, this was in my power? Because I'm pretty sure his lawyers, like
Hmm.
he'll tell his staff, give me a reason why this was in my power. But the consequences, like we're still caught up on like a bad debate that this thing kind of slipped through the cracks.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's some super scary times.
I think
Mm-hmm.
another thing,
Mm-hmm. Keep going.
yeah, I was going to say, I think another thing too is that people want to see the Democrats play a little bit more hardball. I mean, a little bit would be an understatement, but I think people do want to see the Democrats play more hardball. I know for a while we had like the Michelle Obama quote, "When they go low, we go high." And I think people are getting to the point where it's like, okay, but do we? Like, there is more that needs to be done, and I don't know. I think that is a big thing too that I'm hearing. Because with so much, at stake for democracy, which people are hearing all the time, it's like, okay, so what are you doing about it? How are you going to, actually vouch for us? And been having a lot of conversations too, where people are like, I don't feel like we have anyone to protect us at this point. Like it's kind of like we're on our own. And the best way we can do something is by voting in November. But in terms of having someone in the government stand up for our rights, and I'm not talking about in an insurrection way, but I'm talking about, like doing what you can in policy that we're going to see, or are we going to just continue playing it safe? And when they're not playing it, when the other side is not playing it safe, like at all.
I'm just more nervous that things have gotten so far out of hand because these are now court rulings that have happened. And it's not like a law that I
Hmm.
can go back and change the law. This is the interpretation of written law. So now, if in the future somebody wants to challenge a president, say it's past Trump, say it's in 8 years from now, they're going to go back to this ruling and say, "Oh, this was precedent," and it raises the bar to overturn this precedent in this ruling. And this is just so many different one of many different precedents that the Supreme Court uh, has kind of overturned, and they've really trying to upend decades of established law. So it's not an understatement when people say like the right to abortion, the right to woman bodily autonomy is on the ballot. It's not. I don't think it's an understatement to say voting rights are in the ability to vote, the ability to discriminate for voting is on the ballot. It's not, I don't think
Hmm.
it's just not out of the realm of anything that is established law. Just assume all of it can be challenged if it makes sense. I want to close out with this. I don't know if you had seen like President Biden gave a long speech, but also Congresswoman AOC Alexandria Ocasio Cortez of New York put on Twitter or put on X that she's looking to want to impeach the justices or draw up some articles of impeachment, starting with Clarence Thomas, more than likely. Um, I'm dubious if that's going to actually go anywhere, but I know is people like her with huge platforms that do come out. I think we need to see like not just super far progressive or what people consider far left. Like, we need to see a coalition of people really kind of stand up against some of these rights. And it matters voting up and down the ticket, because the powers, like the powers that be, it's just kind of, it's kind of scary. I'm still digesting all of this. I don't know about you, but it's, I think we're in the know more than the average person, so that's why it kind of hits us in a different way. What do you think?
I think that we have just gotten to a point, like you said, where like we're so far gone. When I know I brought up January 6th before, but the thought that someone who uh, caused something like that, where members of Congress' lives were in risk, the vice president's life was in danger, and it can't just be like a shared ideal that we agree on, that
Mm-hmm.
someone who is capable of causing something like this should not be on the ballot. I think that just shows how far gone we are. And you bringing up AOC, I think is a great point, because even though we know that impeachment is probably not going to happen, people want to see people like having the balls to do stuff like that, even if it's not going to fall through. Like, I think it means something to people when they see there is actually something for accountability, a push for accountability. And we just have never seen Trump have any type of accountability. And I think I like the way that AOC does politics. I know it's a little bit controversial, but
Mm-hmm.
even if that's not going to happen, we know on the front line we'll try to make something happen, you know? And she's going to, people may have not even thought about that, the idea of impeaching a Supreme Court justice. But, thinking of my messaging and marketing framework, someone in marketing, associating impeachment with what the Supreme Court is doing is putting it in people's brains that what they're doing is not normal. And maybe this is something that we should not be accepting. It could maybe open the door for accountability for Supreme Court justices who also have not been having to face that. We saw Clarence Thomas's wife paying for buses to go to January 6th, no accountability for that. The upside down flag at Justice Alito's house. Those are the kind of things that, if you were not.
Oh no, I'm here. I'm here. I just was. I'm totally here. We just
Okay.
was. Oh,
Yeah.
my bad.
These
I
are,
was.
yeah. These are the types of,
Mm-hmm. Keep going. I'm listening.
no, good. Good. But yeah, no, there's just a lot happening with the Supreme Court. And I think we do need to start opening the conversation of how can we actually, if these people at the Supreme Court aren't upholding, their sworn duty to uphold the Constitution, like what options do we have? Like, are we going to let them just keep like this relentless kind of power grab, or like, what is going to happen? Something has to be done.
I agree. Well, keep it up. Keep up. Like, we got to keep breaking this down. I think the posts matter. I think it's even kind of moving forward. We got to make sure we are explaining what's happening in as simple as terms as possible. Bringing it back, it's so much even deeper than the election. I think leading to this, I'm hoping this leads to more demonstrations at the Supreme Court, more demonstrations around the country. I think we need some deep dives. I think we even need memes and comedy about this. Any way that people can like wake up to this fact. And this is, to me, just as and some of these Supreme Court rulings that have happened are just as damaging as the one a couple years ago that sought to potentially overturn Roe versus Wade, and how that was a galvanizing force in the 2022 election. I think that was a pretty straightforward thing. This is something we have to make as straightforward as possible to people, to listeners, just so that they're aware and understand what's at stake. But thank you again. I know we gotta jump off. This was a quick emergency pod. We just wanted to come on and draw a little bit more attention to this. We're gonna do more of these collabs before, and I promise folks we're gonna fix the. It might be, I don't know if what we see is a little audio and so forth like that. Like I said, it was emergency, so we had to jump on by any means necessary. But Kayla, with the executive T, checking in. Thank you. Appreciate you for joining. Cameron Calvin with the Hip Politics podcast. Again, make sure you read up on the Supreme Court ruling on partial immunity, the partial immunity that is granted Donald Trump and future presidents. Um, it's some really deep stuff. These are some troubling times. So if there's never wasn't ever a reason to vote and realize voting has consequences, here's Exhibit A. On that note, we are out. Peace.